Hello and welcome to this recording on getting started with Sophos Cloud Optix API using PostMan. So in this recording, I'll be showing you how you can start to interact with the exposed API of Sophos Cloud Optix. So PostMan is a very popular application. It's used among API developers. It makes it very easy to test, to develop, and to document APIs. It allows users to quickly put together simple and even complex HTTP requests to API endpoints. So in this particular recording, I'll be focusing mainly on testing and just showing you how to explore the Sophos Cloud Optix API. So now a quick disclaimer before I proceed. Just some quick clarification. This is not a deep dive video, so the title says getting started. So it's a getting started video. So my goal here is really to keep things very simple and not to get into the different complexities around like the use of the API or the utilization. So nevertheless, this video should give you a very good foundation that you can build on to implement cooler automation and some nice interaction with this amazing cloud security solution by Sophos. And if you've not yet checked it out for your organization, if you're doing anything that has to do with Azure, AWS, Google Cloud, go check out Sophos Cloud Optix. It's really cool. It'll make your life easy when it comes to security and compliance and visibility into that. Okay, let's get right into this. So here's what I'll try to cover. Let's see the agenda. So we'll start by downloading and installing the latest version of Postman for our operating system. In this particular demo, I'll be using Windows, but you could as well be using a Linux machine or Mac. Then I'll go to enable the API on my Sophos Cloud Optix test account. And then we'll do a quick review of the Sophos Cloud Optix API documentation. So a lot of the things that I'll be showing you, there's certain information that essentially it makes it more easier to get if you go through the documentation. So we'll do a quick review of that. And then I'll show you how do you authenticate to the Sophos Cloud Optix API, how do you construct your request in Postman with the authentication header as part of that. And then we'll talk about API examples, and I'll show you example API calls using Postman. So let's get right into this. So number one, let's go download and install the latest version of Postman for my operating system. So here's the Windows OS I'll be using. I'll bring up Internet Explorer browser. I'll go to the URL. So you can just Google Postman download and it will take you to the same URL that I'm going to now. So getpostman.com/downloads. I go to download the Windows 64-bit version, and if I go ahead and just run that directly from the download link below there. So this should not take long to install at all. So just to mention that after the installation, you would need to either create an account, or in my case, I'll just be using a Google account to sign in to Postman. So here's the installation process already started with that. So while it's doing the installation, so what I'll do is I'll go over to my Sophos Cloud Optix environment and let's go through step number 2. Let's go enable API on my Sophos Cloud Optix account. So over here, let's put in my my credentials for Optix. So signed into that. So what I need to do is if I go to on the settings there, and if I go on the integrations, and I have the Sophos Cloud Optix API option here. So if I click on that, and I have the option to enable that. So if I go to generate a new key, I'll copy the key because I'll need this key. So I'll make a note of this in my window over here. So, and I can set the expiry so to either never, 1 year, or 6 months. So I'll set it to 6 months. After this demo, I'll be getting rid of this account and everything anyway. So it's just to show you how this works. And then if I click save on that, and that's essentially enabling that. And what you can also see below here is that it's downloaded the API key in form of a text file over here. So I can always keep that secure in a safe somewhere, in a software safe, and then I can refer to it if I need to in the future. So let's proceed through our steps. So step number 3, let's do a quick Sophos Cloud Optix API documentation review. So again, I'll go back to the Sophos Cloud Optix console. And if I click on where I enabled the API, and if I look below here, I have the option to click and access the documentation from here. So if I click on that, you'll see where the documentation is. So it gives you a list of the currently exposed APIs for IP whitelist, outgoing traffic, and for LAT. And it gives you like a quick documentation of usage, the different meanings of the different response codes, and even certain valid parameters and values that you could use. And I'll be referencing some of the parameters when I show you like the different API call examples that I'll be doing. So let's go over to, so essentially what I would just want to mention here is just make sure that you go through this documentation. It's got very useful stuff. I do realize that some people may struggle with this, so which is hence why I'm making this video, because once you've seen this video and you've read the accompanying community document, it makes sense for you to interact with what's documented here in this particular documentation, so you'll find it useful. So let's get back. So hopefully Postman is fully installed now. So let me show you how to authenticate to the Cloud Optix API. So if I go to the documentation very quickly, documentation references this. Under authentication, if I just do a quick Control F for authentication, and then you have sending an authenticated request, you need to send this HTTP header. So let me make that a bit bigger. So you need to send this HTTP header and with the API key and then the API key value for your authentication. So let's go back to the whiteboard to show you what I did earlier. So what I did earlier was I generated an API key in Sophos Cloud Optix. And the value of this key, I'll need to send this in an HTTP header in the request for this to be authenticated to Sophos Cloud Optix. So let me show you how to do that in Postman. So let's go back to my machine. So here we go. So Postman already installed. Again, if this is your very first time, it may ask you to authenticate. So just go ahead and either create a new account or use your Google account or Facebook account to authenticate. In my case, I'll click on File and I'll click on New tab. And that gives me a new tab up here. And actually, I have some tabs already. So here's what I'll do with the authentication. So I'll go to use one of the endpoints. So let's go back to the whiteboard. So I'll use this endpoint because I want to do a sample GET request. So I'm going to use that and the whitelist IP endpoint, and I'm going to use that as the URL. So let's go get that endpoint and let's go copy that. I'm just copying it from where I am. So if I paste that here, that's the endpoint over here. So that's my GET request. So the method is set to GET, but I need to authenticate. So what I'll do if I go under authorization, I'm not going to be using any of these. So I can either leave this as no off or set this to inherit off from parent, but I'm not using this. So what I'll do is if I go under headers, and under header, I'll set a new header called authorization. So let's go copy and paste that here. And I'll need the value. So the value we need to be the value of my API key. So actually not just the API key. So I would first of all need to put API key, then space, then the value of my API key. So that's what you need for the authentication. So let me copy my API key here and I'm going to paste that there. So that's that. So now I should be able to test this. So I'll show you the current value that I have. If I go back to my Optix account, if I scroll down on the IP whitelist here, I only have a single entry for 1.1.1.1 as part of the whitelist. So this whitelist is used by the AI engine of Sophos Cloud Optix to exclude certain trusted IPs from all the anomaly assessments that the AI engine does. So this is how you can exclude that. So just doing this as a test. So if I go back to this, if I go ahead and click send, so that sent my request, and instantly you can see that I got my response back. So actually I can make this a bit bigger for you to see. So let's go. Yep. And you can see I've got my response back and it's showing me what my IPs are. So that's good. So that shows you how to authenticate. So the other thing that I'll do is I'll go ahead and I'll show you different API call examples. So let's start with this one first. Get a lat count example. So right now in my Optix environment, what I have is I've onboarded an Azure environment. Optix has done security assessment, compliance assessment on this environment. So I have certain alerts that of what's going on within the environment. But if I want to use the API to get like a count, so this could be useful if I'm doing some form of automation. In a later video, I'll be showing you how to integrate Optix with a Jenkins pipeline, and you'll see some of the use cases for this. So, but in the meantime, is just keeping it very basic. You see what I mean. So you have all the alerts here, but let's say I want to start getting some statistics regarding this. So how do I construct that? So let me show you how to construct that um, in Postman. So the first thing that I'll be using this alert count API endpoint. So that's what I'll need there. So my method is get because I'm just getting that, and that's the URI that I'll be going to. But then I'll need to include in that also my API key, the authorization header for that. So those are the three main things that I need to make this to work. So the methods get the URI and also my authorization header that includes my API key. So let's go do that. So what I'll do is if I go back to where I have Postman running, I'll change the URL here to the alert count for the API endpoint. So my authorization header is already set, right? Authorization API key space, the value of my API key. And yeah, so that's really it. So if I go ahead and click send here, it gives me the statistics of the current alerts that I have in the environment. So I have 4 critical alerts, 14 high alerts, 18 medium, 17 low, and 53 total. So that just gives you a quick overview of that. And one of the other things that you can begin to do is if I take you back to the documentation, if I go to the alert count documentation, so let's go over that very quickly. So let's scroll down to the alert count. You see certain parameters here. So for example, if I want to get the alert count for a particular alert type, I can use a parameter to specify that, and I can specify a value for a particular provider list. So let me give you an illustration. So right now I've only onboarded an Azure account. I've not onboarded any AWS account. So let's go ahead and try that. So what I'll do is I'll add a parameter for provider list and the value will be set to Azure. So let's go do that in Postman. So if I go back here, if I go under params here, and I'll go to add the parameter for provider list. So let's go back, provide the list, value will be Azure. And if I go ahead and click send, I expect to get a similar count. Now, if I change the value of this parameter from Azure to AWS, and if I click send to that, and you can see it's 0 because I don't have any AWS environment onboarded into Optix yet. So you can see how you can begin to play around using the params section in Postman to fill in like or to filter the results that you're getting using parameters. And you can go on and on if you want to get particular alert count for a particular account ID. So you can go ahead and specify the account ID maybe for a particular AWS subscription or for a particular, for the particular AWS account or a particular Azure subscription or a GCP project. So you can go ahead and specify the account ID there, and then you can filter the results. Hopefully that makes sense to you. So moving on, let's go ahead and give example number 2, which is the alerts themselves, because that's just statistics about the alerts. What about the alerts themselves? So for this one, so let's get rid of that. Oh, let's get rid of that in a more cleaner way. So get alert example. So the API endpoint that I need for that is the alert API. So if I go ahead and copy that, and if I go ahead and have that, so I need my URI again, and similar, I need my API key for my authentication. So if I go ahead and, so that's what I need. So let's go do that. So if I go back to here, and I'll go get my alerts this time. So let's go get alerts, right? And if I just do this, so one thing to mention over here, so this will make sense to you also. So there's no more parameters. The header, I still have my authorization header. If I click send, I expect an error. The page number should be greater than 0. And if I go back to the documentation, if I go for the area that specifically documents alerts, so number one, you notice that it says this particular API endpoint is paginated. So, and there is a certain parameter. So for example, I have the page and the size. So you need to specify a page and it needs to start with 1 at least. And then you can specify the size to determine the count of alerts that you want to return. And the count has to be, so the count, the default is 20 if you don't specify any, but it should not be more than 50 is what advised. So if I go back over here, so I'm sending the endpoint to that. If I go under parameters, I'll set the key to page. So let me just make sure that I've got the right one. So I've got page. And what I'll do is the value for this, I'll set this to 1. And this will return all the alerts in page 1. So if I go ahead and click send to that, it gives me a list of all the alerts and I can have a look at those. So it gives me all of that. So that's good. And also if I want to, I can go ahead and limit that. For example, I can say size parameter equals to 1 also, and that's only going to return one result. So rather than returning a bunch of results, I'm only going to get one. So you can begin to play around with that. But whenever you're interacting with the alert endpoint, ensure that you specify a page at least, and it starts with 1. So that's for the alert. So let's see, what else did I have on this list? So the get whitelist, I already showed you that example earlier when I did the authentication. So there's no need to show that again. Let me show you the one for like, what if I want to post some data? I want to do some configuration using the API. So if I want to do a post for the IP whitelist example in this case, so if I go ahead and get the URI for that, and I'll also need my API key for that request. So right now I currently have that set to, I only have 1.1.1.1 set in my whitelist. So if I wanted to, I could add multiple. So let's go do that. So let's go back to PostMan and I'll get the URI for the IP whitelist. So let's paste that in there. My authorization header is set, so that's all good. But then what happens is, because I want to do a post, I'll need to change the method from get to post. Again, if I just do a get here, I will just have just the reply back. But I want to do a post, I actually want to configure this. So I'll set that to post, but then I'll need to specify the data that I want to post. So under this, I'll need to go under body. And there are two things that I'll do here. Number one thing that I'll do here is I'll specify raw. Say I'm posting the raw data, but in what format am I going to be posting this raw data? So I'll change this from text. I'll change this to application JSON, because that's what the endpoint I accept. And if I do that, one of the things that you notice that it's changed is the same as setting the content type in the header to application JSON. So you could as well have done that, but I'm just showing you the easy way to do that. So if I go on the body, I set this to raw. I set the data type that I'm going to be sending to JSON. So, and what I'll do is I'll go ahead and copy the body that I'll be posting. So if I go ahead and put this there. So for example, if I go ahead and change this to 3.3.3.3.3, so account ID now, which means everything. If I wanted to set this for a particular account ID, I'll need to obtain the account ID and specify it there. So if I have multiple cloud platforms or cloud environment onboarded into Optix. So to cut the long story short, there you go. That's my data that I want to post. I go ahead and click send to that. And if I scroll down, I should get the result here. And if I'm not seeing any error messages, that's good. That means it's successful. If I go back to this page, if I go ahead and just click a refresh, just to refresh on that, and let's see what comes up after it's refreshed. So you can see now I've got 2.2.2 and 3.3.3.3 also. So that brings me to the end of this particular demo. Hope you've gotten some useful information out of this. Now, every single thing that I've just showed you are documented in a new community post that details how to get started, how to begin to interact with the Sophos Cloud Optix API using PostMan. So I'll put the link in the description below, so make sure you check that out. The other thing that I want to mention that I like about Postman is that once you're able to construct your request over here in Postman the way that you want it, what I absolutely love about Postman is that you can now go on the code and it will actually give you the request that you've just constructed, either as HTTP in multiple languages. So if you wanted to interact with this using Python, Postman will actually, so let's go ahead and select that. Oh, so let's select call, for example. It gives me like the code of what I need if I wanted to interact with this using call. If I wanted to interact with this using Go, it gives me the essentially the block code that I could use. So it converts that for me. Yeah, I think I need to have a look at the Python one. So it, I hope that makes sense to you, and I hope that you found that very useful. So thanks very much for watching this video, and in my very next video, what I'll be showing you is how to interact with the Sophos Cloud Optix API using call. So I'll see you in the next video.